All right to pretend all we really have was willing.
Welcome back to KTAL LP FM in Las Cruces, New Mexico, a community radio station. We're at 101.5 on the dial. We're also streamed live at lccommunityradio.org. I'm your host, Vince Gutschick, for this hour that's just about to end. It's a segment called Science. Let's take a look. I'm a career scientist who's had a lot of fun doing science for all these years, and we cover a lot of it on this show, every aspect from interesting things to read to fun things involved in everyday life, interviews. I should mention that next week at this time, 12 to 1 p.m. Tuesdays, we're going to have Clay Doyle from El Paso Electric Company, and we will talk about the electric grid, which is the biggest machine on Earth, always moving. I've got a list of books that might be interesting to read. Here's some that I consider classics. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily very old, but I would recommend anything written by Václav Smil. His last name is S-M-I-L. He's a geographer at the University of Manitoba. He writes so engagingly. I will mention a few of his titles. One of them is Cycles of Life, and I'm trying to remember which topics that covered. There's also Energies, about everything from metabolic energy to fossil fuels and so on. And another one is The Earth's Biosphere. Another author who is so engaging is Stephen Vogel. Alas, he died a few years ago. He was at Duke University. Really interesting career. He never had any grants for big scientific projects, but he did brilliant experiments and is an excellent writer. One of his books is Prime Mover, the story of human muscle, how it works, how it was the basis of our whole economy until the Industrial Revolution. Another one is Vital Circuits. It's about blood supply and some really interesting ways that it works and is regulated. Another one is Life in Moving Fluids. What's it like to be an organism in the air, a bird, or a floating microbe, or in water, a fish, or again, a microbe, working in very different regimes of whether the viscosity or inertia really drives what you're able to do. And the last one that I mentioned is Cat's Paws and Catapults. Catapults. Cat is a little play on words there. How much is biomimetics valuable? That is, should we try to mimic what nature does? In bird wings, we did learn something. Say the Wright brothers, they knew that they had to flex the wings in certain ways, as birds do, to make turns. Now, the big challenge in flight early on was partly to get enough power and lift, but even bigger was how do you turn the plane in midair? And they were the ones who figured that out. There are other things that people are trying to learn from what's going on in biology. One of them is, well, let's see, which one would I pick out? Oh, spider silk. Yes. Is it stronger than steel per unit of cross-section? Yes. But there are certain restrictions on how useful it will be in given circumstances. Somebody talked about making what do you call those restraints that they use on jet planes landing on carriers, the ones that capture them and dissipate the energy. A spider silk used for that instead of, I believe, nylon might even catch fire because it doesn't dissipate the energy very well. It soaks up a lot of energy when it's doing that. Okay. I really like the books by Edward O. Wilson, The Ant Guy. One of the books that I've loved is Sociobiology. There's controversy about it, trying to explain how we act on evolutionary bases. Okay. And, of course, one of my favorites is Richard Feynman. And these are hugely amusing and funny, but also deep and telling. One of them is, "Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman." Another one is, "What do you care what other people think?" Now, I have a special connection that makes me very fond of talking about him. He was my teacher in advanced quantum mechanics when I was a grad student at Caltech. And the remarkable thing, well, one of the many remarkable things about him is he was the same in class, on TV, and in person. Very dedicated teacher. He loved to explain the world to himself and to others. One of his sayings was, "I can't understand anything I can't create." And the other thing is, of course, how do you delve into science to do something new? He said, don't read what other people did and follow them into those blind alleys. Start from scratch. And he's done that many times. There was a book about him by James Gleick, who wrote Chaos and some others. It's called Genius. It captured the essence of what Feynman was like so well that I wrote a letter to Gleick and I said, "You brought the man alive again." And Gleick wrote back and said, "That's the highest compliment an author can have." Now let's jump back 150 or more years. Alfred Russel Wallace, the co-discoverer of the theory of evolution, he wrote up his travels and his scientific findings in a book called The Malay Archipelago. And I have read that twice. I call it the most stunning travel adventure ever written. I mean, here is a guy who traveled all over the world to the least developed parts. What do you do to get to Amboan or Papua New Guinea? How do you get there? You go in pirogues. You get anything possible. How do you survive? How do you get food? How do you get comfortable relations with the locals? You got a letter from the Sultan, and that only gets you so far. There's also a book about him and his travels, which I call the most beautiful book ever printed, and it's called Archipelago, Islands of Indonesia by Gavin Dawes and Marty Fujita. You have to see this thing to believe the pictures, as well as get the beauty in the text. Another one on a completely different topic is Harold McGee's, that's M-C-G-E-E, his book called On Food and Cooking. You want to know how you get nourished, why you prefer certain things, what happens when you're cooking, why do you select things? And then we'll jump to another distant topic called Color and Light in Nature. Well, that's the title. It's by David Lynch and William Livingston. If you look up in the sky, you will see some very intriguing patterns. Some of them are pretty rare. But there's one funny story about a fellow who was flying in an airplane, and he saw this light pattern down below around the shadow of the airplane on clouds. And he said, "Oh, the glory," which is, of course, this atmospheric phenomenon or this optical phenomenon. Everybody thought he was having a religious experience. Anyway, I'll have more to recommend and lots more science to go over next week at the same time, 12 to 1 on Tuesdays. You're listening to KTAL FM in Las Cruces, New Mexico. It's 101.5, and it's also streamed live on lccommunityradio.org. And please visit the website. You can also see how to support us. Thank you.